A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. My name is Kenneth Lukagandason, your host, and today we'll be looking at the commissioning of Karuma Hydroelectric Dam and the growing demand for power in Uganda. Now, earlier today, the Karuma Hydroelectric Dam, located on the border of three districts, Yandongo, Nyoya, and Oyam, was commissioned, adding an extra 600 megawatts on the national grid. It's a project. This project was conceived in 1995, but construction began in 2013 at the tune of $1.7 billion, including its relevant infrastructure, such as substations and high voltage lines. Now, even before the commissioning of this dam, the government had already told us that the country has adequate power to strip its demand. Ironically, connections have remained low amidst that particular high demand. Now, the cost of the electricity has also remained high. Now, to the surprise of many, Uganda exports power to the neighboring countries, including Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, and the DR Congo. And earlier today, President Yoweri Museveni hinted about the possibility of extending the same to South Sudan. Now, the government says this makes sense because the power is redundant. Now, at the commissioning, the communities demanded that there must be cheap supply of power in their area. Now, President Museveni said that this dam will support the transformation of our economy and the communities. The government says that more energy sources are needed and they must be developed to meet the growing demand. So this evening we'll be looking at the impact of these 600 megawatts. What do they mean for this country? And taking into account that we are in a discussion where we are looking at energy transition to ensure adequate power supply in our country. I have three guests, but two are already here in the studio. Let me introduce Mr. Patrick Kichoncho Katabazi. He's an economist, policy analyst, a lawyer, and executive director at the Center for Budget and Tax Policy. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Katabazi.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Kenneth, and our listeners. You forget my other credentials as the social protection enthusiast.
You are the social protection enthusiast, somebody who thinks more about the
people,
poor, the vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And the power is very critical in transforming communities and addressing vulnerability in our society. We'll be looking at that angle in particular. Also in studio, Mr. Peter Kauju, the head of communications and marketing at Umeme Uganda Limited. He's also a veteran journalist. Once a journalist, always a journalist. Good evening, Mr. Kauju, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Ken, and all that are listening to us. We're very pleased to be here and specifically talk about a very important subject that almost affects everybody's life. So I'm pleased to be back in studio again.
It's long
sure.
Since we last met.
It's been a while. I've been busy stringing conductors and planting poles, ensuring that people get the power that they need.
We'll hear from you just how prepared you are for this particular mega project. And let me begin with you, who is working directly in this sector. What does this mean, having an extra 600 megawatts on the national grid?
Thank you very much, Ken. Today has been a very interesting day, not only in the energy sector, but in the history of our country, because we know that energy is at the center of everything when it comes to development. So when you look at our journey, it started way back around 1954, of course, with the commissioning of Owen Falls Dam by the deceased Queen. But a lot has been happening over time, because if you recall where we came from, so we had only that one dam, and then progress started, moving on and moving on. You remember the times when we had load shedding. Load shedding would mean that people were in need of power, but they could not get the power.
So there was rationing.
Yeah. So you had to plan which area to live on and which area to switch off. But a lot has happened, and with the coming on board of Karuma today, we really are very confident that it's going to go a long way in terms of supporting the electricity sector and also powering the country. Because if you recall, electricity is generated at the dams, and then it is supposed to be transmitted through the high voltage transmission lines, and then it is supposed to be stepped down and then distributed. So when light is here, most people look at umeme. They say we need our power here. But there's a whole process which starts with generation and then transportation of that electricity, or of those electrons, if I may call it, and then we are able to refine it and ensure that it can be delivered to the people. We are happy to say that from where we're coming from, in 2005, when umeme was given a concession, we had about 250,000 customers on the national grid. We are pleased to announce that as we speak now, we have over 2.1 million customers on the national grid. And what does this mean? If the economy is growing, it means Ken, Patrick, and every other Ugandan is actually getting more money, and they are able to make investments, and they will need power if they have built up, premises or places for business. And so we are growing averagely in terms of electricity demand at about 12%. So when you look at the current statistics from UBOS, they said we about 46 million Ugandans, and we have been able to only serve 2.1 currently. What does that mean? It means that we have a lot of work to do. There are so many efforts that we need to put in from all ends, government, private sector, and all those that along this value chain.
All right, I'll be getting back to you to look at your role in actually making sure that these 600 megawatts are in people's houses. How is Umeme doing that? Because we actually told the demand is high, but the connections are very few. What's going on? Because if we still have this situation, then this electricity is useless to an ordinary Ugandan. My third guest has just walked in studio, Miss Loy Florence Kyozaire. She's a certified energy expert from the World Green Energy Council. She chairs the council at the Nakawa Vocational Training College. She's also CEO at Sendea. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us, Florence.
Good evening, listeners.
Thank you so much indeed for making time. We'll be hearing from you shortly. Let me hear from you, Mr. Katabazi, the economist. What does this 600 megawatts mean for our economy?
First of all, I would like to congratulate the President, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and the people of Uganda on this very, very important milestone. Because here we are talking about a single dam generating 600 megawatts, which is probably the largest underground dam in Africa. So for me, that in itself is a very, very significant achievement. By and large, Uganda's energy fortunes have been very, 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 very bright, to the extent that we've been having about 1,400 megawatts. With 600 megawatts coming on board, that makes it about 2,000 megawatts. But the bigger story is that all that is not utilized as we speak now. And with coming on board of 600 megawatts, we shall have about 1,000 megawatts that will be unused for now. So what is happening right now in this country is that we are generating more energy or more power that we can possibly consume. That may not necessarily be that there is no demand. Well, there will also be a question about the demand side of things. But I think we still have a lot of potential. There could be demand which is suppressed demand because of limited distribution mechanisms that we have, and other, how do I call it? And other challenges that we have in the electricity distribution chain. But also more importantly, again, is the social protection angle that we are talking about. So if you have 21% of the population who are extremely poor, and of course more than 40% of the people who may not necessarily participate actively in the market, then it also affects the other demand side of things. Because there could be those people who would love to be connected to the grid, but they cannot afford. Or in some cases, by the way, even when we are talking about the 2.5 people connected to the grid, you have many other people who have electricity poles not only running above their houses. Some of them actually have connections, but they spend a month without paying for power because they actually don't have the means to do so. So those are some of the things that we'll have to look at to also to address the issue of demand. But I also think, from what the president has said today, that with opening up to exporting power, South Sudan, we might start seeing some of this power being utilized. Because if we don't do that, remember here we have invested 6.2 trillion in this dam, of which about 933 billion has been our direct investment as part of counterpart funding, and of course the other one, of course, is the loan that we have to pay at the end of the day. But here I'm saying this is an investment that has cost Uganda a lot of money. So if we have power that is not going to be used, it also means that we shall incur more cost in redundant costs. So the redundant costs definitely again will be transferred, in my view, again to the consumers, because I do not see a scenario where a government will have to be looking for money from without to maintain this infrastructure, without any foreseeable expectation that some of these costs is going to be met by consumers at various levels. So for me, I think the earlier projection was that the prices for power were going to go down with Karuma coming on board to about 175 kilo per kilowatt power, rather hour per kilowatt hour, and that of course for me would be a welcome idea if this actually comes into play. But again, as my colleagues will attest, pricing of power takes into account very many dynamics, and we hope that with the coming on board of this very, very powerful dam that has been launched, we shall start seeing power coming down. But also, before I conclude on this particular point on whether we stand to benefit a lot from this, I've already said we shall, amidst limitations that are at play. The issue of having power surplus, but we still have electricity in most towns of this country on and off. You have power in Kabale that all the time is not there. Yep. You have many other places that are reporting outages, power outages, day in, day out. So despite the fact that the president and many other people are going to be singing, independence, we have energy independence now because we are generating more than what we can consume. But you are going to keep seeing these reports happening, and it is something that we need service providers in this sector to look into, something that we need government also look into, so that when we are singing the song, we complete all the verses. That we have power surplus, yes, and we also see it all the time in our homes, in our schools, in our hospitals.
Right. Let's hear the view of Florence. You as an expert in this particular sector. Now, the government has been saying that we have adequate power. We now have extra 600 megawatts coming on board, but they're also talking about more projects in the pipeline, including solar energy. They're talking about nuclear energy, among others. Where does this put the country? What's your take about this power potential? And do you think we are doing enough to ensure that the ordinary Ugandan actually gets this power so that it becomes useful, like Patrick here has suggested?
Yes, thank you so much. The issue about Uganda, just like my colleague has said, singing all the verses, it is very interesting. But of course, every song starts with some verse. So maybe we at stanza 1 with the generation capacity, and then stanza 2 we have to go into the issue of how does this power reach the people and how can they utilize it. And of course, for us who are coming from the renewable energy sector, our role is to make sure that the biggest part where the grid cannot reach, we are able to support. And as you know, solar or renewable energy is covering 38% on energy access currently, because we can reach anywhere in the mountainous areas. I've covered the biggest part of this country, but there are places you really look at and you're like, here, Kisoro, Buhweju, Sironko, the mountainous areas where it is really costly to run the distribution network from the main grid. And so much as we have a surplus, I still think that the government is doing a lot of interventions, especially under the Ministry of Energy, to make sure that the power consumption is increased through, like you've seen, they've just launched the clean cooking intervention, where we are expecting more Ugandans to cook using power. And the calculations show that actually cooking using those energy efficient appliances that have been customized to the African nature, they can actually even cook the matoke. When we are launching at the UK residence for the ambassador, the Minister of Energy, Honorable Ruth Nankabira, he was involved in actually the matoke bit. And so we expect that the interventions that are being made, and I think there's a lot going on, that the general public may not be knowing, but at least we are seeing things coming out, which shows that the country and the Ministry of Energy, there is a lot of cooking being made, and then we are seeing those interventions. So we are not worried of too much power in the country. Of course, there are issues of maintaining the infrastructure, but sometimes people, even us who are seated here, and many listeners who are able, people from Kololo, from Yeng and where, you might find they are not using power to cook. Why? Because maybe they don't know about the technology, and the awareness is not yet there. But with more awareness, we expect that people will start utilizing power. Lastly, since I'm also on the skills development part, the vocational institutions are doing also, and of course at BTVET and under the Ministry of Education, the more you train people about and create more awareness about different technologies, you can see a lot of cropping vocational businesses from vocational institutions, like the way you see people who are doing welding. I think we are seeing more welding places. Even you go as far as Agago, where you find people welding, and these people are using power. Now, our main issue would be maybe reliability. I've been to the other month, I was in Yumbe, and power is on and off. I was in Pakwach, by the time you wake up, power is on and off. But with the new connection, maybe we expect some stability. So I think our major issue, of course, we have the issue of poverty. Poverty levels in rural areas, but also we have that issue of reliability that makes you and another person not feel like investing in their village because they are not sure of the power. Yes, and even we still have a lot to do with the resorts, the eco tourism, whatever. Those people also need a lot. Most of them are relying on renewable energy or generators. So if there is a way they can, I think the Umeme spokesperson will tell us if they have any interventions, how the distribution network can be able to reach those places, people will be able to use power. So we are not worried. And as we fight into the Agenda 2030 and Uganda's Vision 2040 to see that we become a middle income country, we hope people will consume more power. Yeah.
All right. Kauju, and I come to you because we now have too much power, too much demand, but very few connections. What's going on? Why are you not taking power to the people?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ken. I think
not only power, but cheaper power.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like Patrick has shared, it's been a great milestone today. Commissioning the largest plant of that nature, not only here in Uganda, but also in Africa. And what that means is that there is commitment, and we see where we are going as a country, because we don't want to go the South African way. You can be on a talk show here, and then they will tell you are likely to go off because power is going off anytime. Demand went ahead of supply. So by the time they woke up, it was very difficult. Infrastructure projects, especially in the energy sector, like Karuma, which has come on board today, it's not a project that you can build in short term and say I'll do it in 2 to 4 years. You can see the time it has taken us to actually actualize Karuma. So you need to plan ahead, and you need to dedicate resources to ensure that demand does not overtake supply. So it is a good thing that people are talking about excess power, but also it may actually not be excess power. because of what is happening. I gave you the example that the economy is actually growing, and the demand is actually also moving forward. So in terms of the preparation to ensure that actually people have power, or we get to utilize this energy, government has come up with, government and partners have come up with quite a number of interventions, and one of them is the electricity connection program, which was launched way back in 2018.
2018?
Yes, in 2018.
So by now we should be having power everywhere.
Yes.
If it was launched in 2018.
Yes. So the plan was to have at least an additional 300,000 connection to the national grid every year since 2018. And we started off well. That target could not be achieved, however, along the way because of a number of other challenges, including COVID. But a lot of people have been connected. That's why we are talking about 2.1 million connections now. But I know of interventions again, like the Scale Up program, which is funded by the World Bank. We started, the Minister for Energy and Mineral Development announced this program way back in March. And the good news is that these connections have actually commenced in a number of areas. And the plan is to add about 1.3 other million customers on the national grid in 2 years. So they are paying. World Bank has provided for this, and the rates have actually been have been cut. They've gone down. You would ordinarily pay about 720,000 earlier if you needed a no-pole service, meaning there's a pole within a radius of about 35 meters, and you only need that connection for as long as your house is wired and properly installed. But that cost came down to about 470. But with the intervention of this particular program, which we are calling Scale Up program, the minister actually talked about today. You only have to pay 41,000 for inspection. If you need a no-pole service, we will come and inspect. If your wiring was done very well and it's up to standard in terms of our expectation, once we clear that your wiring is perfect, then you will pay 15,000 shillings for your preloaded units, the units that come with the meter that we shall install. So in total, that would be about 56,000, and you have a connection. So this is happening across areas where we are operating as Umeme. I know other distributors have also been given the same, and it is happening. It's one of those interventions. The other particular one that we talked about, I think it's Florence that alluded to it, is that they're trying to come up with ways of making electricity affordable. And the other facility which has been ongoing is that there was a survey which was conducted, and we realized that an average family, let's say in a rural area, who is using about 5 bulbs in a month, and probably radio and charging your phones, you would be able to use about 15 kilowatt hours in a month. So government decided to subsidize, and they gave what we call lifeline units. So the first 15 units, when you buy a token of electricity, they come at a subsidized rate of 250 each unit. Yeah, so the first 15 will come at 250. While the normal rate, or from the 16th unit to the 79th, you revert to 803 Uganda shillings. That is the charge which we are implementing, given to us by government of Uganda through ERA. And then again, Florence talked about cooking. Clean cooking.
It's very important now that we're talking about climate change.
Yeah, we definitely have a mandate to protect the environment and ensure that what we found, if we can't maintain, at least we do better in terms of because there's been a lot of destruction when you look at the forest cover that we used to have maybe 10 or so years ago. That's not what we have now. So there was a deliberate program to ensure that we can actually subsidize and reduce on the cooking tariff, so that people can actually embrace cooking using energy, using electricity. And so this tariff actually was sliced by half. Instead of paying 803 per unit, that person pays 400 and about 412 shillings.
All right.
So that is between, if you use averagely between 80 units to 150 units in a month, you will enjoy that benefit. So a lot of interventions are going on with other partners. We have funding through KFW and then ADB to ensure that people can actually afford electricity. And then there's a point that Patrick raised. I was in Cavalry about 3 weeks ago. There was a storm brewing that side because of reliability, but issues of the terrain and all that. Cavalry picks power from Umbarara, and the problem was that we wheel power for about 140 kilometers from there. By the time you get there, you've incurred some technical losses on the line and all that. But also there is increasing demand. People have put up factories and all that. But the good news is that government has actually constructed a substation in Cavalry which is going to serve them starting December this year. So we will not have any more cries in Cavalry come December because we'll be using that substation.
On Radio 1 FM 90, we need to go for a break now. When we return, we'll expand more on this discussion. There are issues of doing to do with cooking that Florence talked about. I'll be going back to her to ask her actually what needs to be done. She also talked about skills, and it's one of the biggest things that the government is talking about. But we have electricity in all these areas. In Kiliandongo earlier today, they were talking about taking electricity to the sub-county level. How about industrialization? We'll be hearing from Patrick on that particular issue. Now, stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming because we'll be referring to them when we return from this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our discussion today focuses on our energy situation in the country, the growing need. Earlier today, the Karuma Hydroelectric Dam, which is 600 megawatts, was officially launched, which brings an extra supply of electricity to our country. But we know very well that the demand is high, the connections remain low. And today I'm speaking to Mr. Patrick Kichoncho Katavazi. He's an economist, a policy analyst, a lawyer and executive director at the Center for Budget and Tax Policy. Ms. Loy Florence Kyozaire, certified energy expert with World Green Energy Council, also chair council, Nakawa Vocational Training College. She's CEO at Sendea. And Mr. Peter Kauju, the head of communications and marketing at Umeme Uganda Limited, also a veteran journalist. Mr. Patrick Kichoncho, the agenda of industrialization, government has been talking about small-scale industries across this country, how they need to do value addition, etc. And people have been crying about lack of electricity to actually power this. And you might have heard from Florence, reliability also is another issue. How do we deal with this situation? What advice would you give to the government now that there is even extra electricity?
Yes, the issue of extra electricity, we have tried to qualify it that there could be suppressed demand that is leading to those numbers. But again, like you have said, the demand is high. So have we estimated the level of demand that is not untapped? And for me, that is where we need to go. And I'm happy that Umeme and government are doing their best to create some substations like the one he has talked about of Kawari, to reduce on the energy losses that arise out of long distances. Of course, we have many areas that are very, very far away from the power centers, from the grid, and to that very extent, those substations will be very important. Industrialization will not be realized to a great extent if we are still grappling with the cost of power or inefficiencies within the energy sector. Because you realize that most of the industries, small scale, large scale, depend on power for them to effectively be able to produce. Now, what are the numbers telling us? You still have medium industries paying an average of 459 Uganda shillings. You have large scale at 367 shillings per kilowatt hour is how they call it. And then extra large at 324, with possibly the largest industries at 300. For me, I think that is still high when you look at the other factors of production, and it is something that we think with these additions of Karuma and many other interventions to reduce costs within the distribution chain would go a long way to ensure that the cost of power in Uganda ultimately goes down, so that the pricing also benefits from that and Uganda starts competing.
What makes you confident that the price is going to go down?
This is my prayer.
The rules of economics actually tell us that where there is demand, the cost is likely to go up.
Yes, but yes. Yeah, okay, there are two things about demand that we are talking about. For example, we now say, looking at the demand level that we have estimated, we have excess power of 1,000, more than half of what we are using. So there's an opportunity there. But also the other important aspect of this part of demand, and as part of our industrialization policy, is that government can come in to provide incentives to drive this sector, because you realize that we are a growing economy and we have high hopes on the small scale businesses, on small scale industries to drive our development agenda. So that would be another area where government would come in.
And Patrick, just to add to what Patrick is saying, this is just not any other product. This is actually a critical service that the country needs. So it is possible when he says that he's very optimistic that all efforts are moving towards seeing that at least there's a shift on the tariff.
Yeah. So and that's why you see now government comes in to subsidize the cost of bringing power to your home, from 720 to the project that he's talking about. All those are interventions that are possible in this dispensation.
Can't we just have free connections and then you tell people to pay for? After all, it's prepaid. You consume what you buy. So can the government just do it once and for all? Give people power, and then, especially where it is urgently needed, where we have infrastructure like small-scale industries coming up, and then we pay.
I think that would be another option in financial modeling, that you can, as a matter of fact, front road expenses.
But for the benefit of the economy.
Yes, you can front road these costs and make the consumer pay through pricing. But also that has a downside effect. That again, you will make power extremely expensive and people start making noise. So there has to be a delicate balance to ensure that the pricing keeps within range, where you make people pay some reasonable amount, but then also you have predictably fair pricing along the chain. So it would be very important to balance the two aspects, I am afraid.
All right. Let's hear from Florence on this particular issue of how do we get this power to the people. You raised a very important issue about cooking, because we are in an era where climate change is an issue. We continue cutting trees, looking for charcoal and fuel for cooking in our homes, yet electricity would do that. But also we are promoting skills development, and the people you're churning out who can do welding and all these other things need electricity to actually do their work. But we seem to be stuck. What advice would you give for us to actually move to the last mile, to the last person who is demanding for electricity? Okay,
now that term is also common in the energy sector, last mile distribution.
Last mile distribution.
With affordable power. Now, the challenge with our last mile distribution, Uganda's settlements is quite different from other countries. When you look at Tanzania, I think it's they are Nyerere who brought this kind of settlement where you find people in one cluster.
Ujama.
They have a mosque, they have a church, they have a school. Yes, but Uganda, we are free. We build wherever we want. You'll find the batwa in the forests. You'll find in the western Uganda, you find a power line running for almost 30 kilometers to going to one home.
And no one is tapping on it.
Yes, and no one else is in the middle there. And that is different. When you go, of course, to eastern and central, I think the settlement, the population is quite high, population density. There you can assume that...
largely because of urbanization, maybe.
Yes, but also like Eastern Busoga, people a bit close. But when you go to the north, you drive long distances. And so to reach that power, to take it to those people, becomes a very big challenge. But with the decentralized energy access, like he's saying, of course, on the side of the main grid, if they can take different substations, it will be easier to be able to reach the people with that power, but also the renewable energy part. Last time I was in Bukunja, Buyikwe.
Buyikwe
Of
district.
course, it's known for Bukunja. But at the waters, somewhere there was a camp for children. But I was happy to see the whole island on the other side lit with power. And how are we reaching there? Because we are having the other bit of renewable energy with mini grids. So we are able to reach those people. And also different islands now. You'll find Kalangala, you'll find Busi, where they are covering that. But now, the challenge that you're talking about excess power, we have other interventions. I really wanted to mention this.
Very quickly.
Uganda is on e-mobility. And you can see they are planning for 3,500 e-charging stations. Of course, I was excited to visit the Kira Motors factory. Very proud of Uganda and very proud of Ugandans for that intervention. And that one is also going to consume a lot of power. And their plans, according to their strategy, that even the spare parts and all that, they would love Ugandans to manufacture them. And so all these things will require people to use power. And of course, in addition with what he's saying. So the e-mobility, of course, the clean cooking and all these things will contribute. But lastly, on the, you see there was a trend trending news in end of 2023 about the 4-point-something trillion being spent by the OPM to cover the refugees. So that is demand that is there. Maybe someone can donate energy efficient cooking appliances that can cover the refugees. If power, we find a way of distributing power to the refugee camps, we are able to also utilize it, because instead of spending 4-point-something trillion and causing deforestation, you can imagine all this firewood. We were complaining about people's firewood, we didn't know it was our government also using all cutting down all these trees. So with the excess issue, excess power from whether Karuma has come on board and many others, we still have, in fact, like he said, there is a lot of demand, but the challenge is that how does the power reach the people? And through different interventions, we should be able, like refugee really, the gentleman from Meme should tell us, and maybe we missed the generation person here, but we should be able, I keep wondering, why don't we try at least go to the biggest bidi, the biggest refugee camp and either
supply
put something there. Yes.
All right. We have comments that are coming in from the listeners. I'll be getting back to them so that you can respond. But you heard from your colleagues here that they are also suggesting ways that actually power can be extended to the people. Can we have some sort of remodeling? We have industrial parks, we have settlements where you can see there's a concentration of people, and you make it deliberate. You take power there and then create the demand. It seems the model you are operating now is that people have to demand and then you supply. Can we have a situation where you can take the power to the point and people are, sort of given the incentive to actually get the connections done?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. I think those are good ideas. Actually, a number of them are happening. We've been able to take power to different industrial parks across the country because we know that there is demand there. This power is generated because we need it consumed. We need it to change people's lives. Power is needed in the economic, sector. It's needed at health centers. There are so many interventions that have been done. For example, we've been working on building dedicated lines to several referral hospitals across the country, and I am happy that this has progressed. Chirudu is on a dedicated line, Entebbe referral is on a dedicated line, Kawempe, we were in Lira initiating works the other day, Mbale is actually already on, Mbarara. So there are quite a number of initiatives to ensure that there is reliability, not just access, but reliable access, reliable supply of power to our consumers. Because if people just have infrastructure there and they are not served, power is on and off, then it beats the understanding or reason for having extended power there. So we are working under different initiatives, of course, with the Ministry of Energy, to ensure that power is actually distributed. And if you read about what they are preparing, of course, NDP 3 and what in NDP 4, electricity, especially not only distribution, but generation, transmission, and distribution is high on the agenda to ensure that people actually have reliable power. There's some information that I needed to provide as well.
Very quickly.
In terms of clean cooking. There are so many interventions that are going on. There are studies that have been done by Makerere University with support from UK Aid and all that to supply appliances across the country. For instance, the electric pressure cookers that Florence was talking about. We used to have, these statements that if matoke is not cooked on fire and all that,
it's not sweet.
It will not be sweet,
Delicious.
But I will give you testimony that actually there are these appliances that are on the market now, which we've been trying, we've been promoting them. We run a pilot which has been very successful, and we are going into the next phase to ensure that people can actually have access to these appliances. They consume less, but also they are very effective in terms of energy, and it means you'll have saved some money in terms of what you'll have spent on fuel, on wood fuel. So such interventions are actually ongoing. And then on reliability, definitely there's a lot that has to be done. And I am happy that we are celebrating Karuma coming on board. But again, we shouldn't extend the celebration, because I told you demand is growing. If we close our eyes and start celebrating forever, we don't want to go the dark side. We have to clearly invest heavily. We should have started actually talking about other generation points. I'm happy that the minister talked about other dams that are likely to come on board, but this really needs to to move fast so that we are able to connect these people that need power. The other thing where we have had challenges, Ken, especially on reliability, is the issue of vandalism. You have seen that actually pylons, those big lines delivering high voltage, electricity, they actually vandalized, and you go for a whole 3 months, you're struggling to replace a pylon because somebody has, cut and they've taken the metal. It happens also in distribution where they come and cut.
President
poles
Yoweri Museveni said
away.
Cabinet on Monday will discuss that issue, and an order will be issued on how to actually handle the people who are doing that. But we have comments coming in from the listeners. Let's begin with this from Clara. There is still some work to be done in the electricity distribution. Currently, Wakiso Town Council is experiencing 10 hours of no power. We are still in the dark, and it happens more than once per week. Imagine the losses to businesses and the security risks in the dark. Then we have another comment, Mr. Kenneth. This message is from residents of Kisasi, shared a few minutes ago. How much does these figures mean when many parts of the city and the country are under darkness? That's Wilson, who is also in Chitetika. We also have another resident of Chitetika who actually sent in a message and said they are in darkness, and Umeme needs to explain this. Benon Fred Twinamasco says Umeme government should get funding to connect everyone as they work on the option of securing billing equipment, since the power will be generated whether consumed or not. Economically, the more the connections with lower unit costs, the more you get happy customers and almost the same profits. Then we have another comment. Good evening. Where is the surplus power? When recently a minister was telling the people to install solar panels for security, etc. The government is getting little revenue due to high cost of installation and corruption. It's government which will save our few remaining trees by reducing electricity tariff and liquid petroleum gas. Otherwise, we are finished. That's Mawa Jacob Amaza, listening in from Moyo District. Then we have a comment from Henry. With increased megawatts in Buwate, we are in darkness looking for batteries to hear Kauju speak. Can you imagine? Then we have another comment. Despite the several power generation dams, why is Uganda still having the most expensive energy in the region? This has not only affected the local wananchi, but also investors in form of industrial overheads. 2, why is it that even the availability of power supply is inadequate as a result of constant load shedding despite this infrastructure in place? Thirdly, we have a milk processing plant in Kisoro, bordering Rwanda, but most often we have incurred huge losses as a result of power outages. That's a comment from Kamugo Fred Keta, listening in from Kira Municipality. Doesn't Kabale have its own mini hydro station? Why wire all the way from Barara to incur losses along the way. Okello Patrick Bonyo from Busega. Religiously speaking, power supply has improved greatly, and I appreciate that. Now, with more power generation on the national grid, do we expect tariff to come down at least to 500 shillings per unit for domestic consumers? For the loan used in the construction of the dam, what gross period were they given to repay? Well, we don't have somebody here who can actually respond to that. Uganda produces a lot of power as per the reports from electricity generation companies and the Minister of Energy. How can the power tariff still be high in Uganda compared to our other countries in the neighborhood? That's Kibeti Patrick listening again from Bududa. Then somebody else writes and says, the cost of power connection is still very high. I am trying to connect power in my village and I've been asked for 15 million for a distance of about 500 meters. That's a comment from Nicholas. Now, let's get responses to some of these issues that are still coming up. The cost of electricity remains high. The connection remains high. And probably that's why some wires are going across communities with no connections. Who wants to respond first?
Well, I could take some.
Okay.
First of all, the issue of reliability, I think I had already talked about it.
You had talked about it?
Yes, and just to alert people that we actually do not have load shedding right now. Unless there's a particular issue, maybe we have had a problem at any of the substations. That's why we would have a notification for emergency load shedding. But with the power that we have now, what people experience are shutdowns. You get a shutdown because you want to conduct a maintenance on a given infrastructure facility somewhere. At times when we have faults, but generally speaking, people equate it to load shedding, but load shedding would be something bigger, what we used to go through. So it's no longer happening. But we're trying our best to ensure that there's actually rehabilitation of the network, the distribution network, to ensure that the poles are firm, to ensure that you have the conductors, the required conductors to carry the electrons that we need in such places. Of course, the calls coming in from Wakiso and all that. We have had challenges, but I'm happy again to indicate that a lot of work has been going on at the UETCL substation in Kawanda, which serves that entire area. So we should have some breath that side. I had only mentioned under that the Scale-Up program, the 41,000 for inspection, but also I wanted to tell you that it's not only applying to no pole service. They are also giving a pole service, but they can only cater for one pole. So that also covers for those people. And if you are in need, please reach out to any of our service centers that are near you, and then we should be able to support. I'm also happy that, West Nile has never seen power. It had never seen the grid since it existed, since planet Earth existed. But now that they have been recently connected, we believe that there's going to be change in the livelihoods of the people that side, because they are picking power from Karuma, and that should be able to support them in comparison to what they have been running, because they've been getting supply through thermal. Under WEMRECO. All
right, let's hear from you, Florence. You had the comments coming in from the listeners. If you can also respond and give us your closing remarks.
Yes, of course, the issue of reliability, and I think that has been a big issue, especially in the urban areas, because Ugandans are becoming more and more exposed. For example, people have gone abroad. When they come here, they are totally, their thinking is different, but also the pressures of work. You see, now we move with work on phone, on a laptop. It is no longer normal to inform people that I was not able to to join a meeting because there was no power in my place. Yes, so the issue of reliability is still key. Of course, there are certain areas in Kampala that are stable, and in some urban areas, but still upcountry districts are still experiencing a big challenge with the reliability. The power is there, yes, but the reliability issue, that's what the distribution network needs to work on. And also on the issue of reliability, of course, even upcountry, there are people, NGOs are really many there. And so it is important. They also need really a lot of reliable power, including hospitals, schools, children, if they are in final exams and power goes off and you have to revise the last bit of it, and or someone is operating a patient. So there are many areas, yes, where we need reliability of power, and I think that is very critical, which the government is also trying to push and trying to work on, and so reducing on the outages if they are there. It is very important that they are worked on. Yes.
All right, Patrick Kichoncho, your response and closing remarks as we come to the end of the show.
Power is very important in our economic development agenda, and looking at the human capital development spectrum, where I have a lot of interest. And she talked about some of those aspects. Health. You normally hear babies dying because the incubators are off power and so many things. Sustaining a health enterprise several kilometers outside Kampala because of the outages is very difficult. And therefore, people who are investing in health sector outside major cities or major towns would need electricity in order for their businesses to thrive. Education, that's a very important indicator, and also a very important tool for alleviating poverty, but also for improving other human development outcomes. You realize that most of the schools are not connected to power, and that in a way bleeds inequality, in a sense that you have children who have power 24 hours or who can access light, and you want them to compete with those who never have any time to do play.
Right.
We are talking about value addition in agriculture. You cannot talk about value addition in agriculture without involving machines.
Exactly.
These machines are run
right.
on power, and that's why it is a very important discussion that we are having. And congratulations to Uganda to doing great in respect to this particular sector and adding in another 600 megawatts, which we think need to be utilized so that we see how that contributes to our development agenda.
All right, and I can assure you, as the media will continue to push you, Mr. Kawuju, and the other stakeholders to actually ensure that we have more connections in order for the country to benefit from the things that Mr. Katabazi and Florence have put across. Thank you very much, dear listeners, and thank you very much, my guests, for making time to be here. And tomorrow, 2 hours of analysis of the top events of the week, Spectrum Extra. Do make a date with us. But right now, over to the studio for the news in English. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Jr. From me and the team here in studio, it's a good night.